Hey, global leader and expatriates, welcome to Joyride with Expatriates. If this is your first time here, in this show, we bring people from around the world to talk about their experiences abroad, how to improve cultural competence, and how to become an effective and happy individual while living abroad. Hi, I'm Tati Fittipaldi, and in this channel, we make videos to help global leaders lead multicultural teams internationally while making financially conscious and impactful business decisions. My mission is to help you grow your international career and reputation without compromising happiness. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Reimer. Kia was born in Denmark, and during the last 9 years, she has lived in 4 different places. Right now, she's living in Singapore, and today we're going to talk to her and learn about her story and her why. So join me in welcoming Kia to our show. Kia, welcome to our show. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Tati, for having me. I'm so happy that we finally make this happen, and I'm happy to be on your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy too. Look, how about we start and you tell us a little bit about your background. So tell us where you're from. I mentioned to our audience that you've been in 4 different places. So tell us where these places were and why did you decide to, move to a different country?
Well, basically, we started in Denmark, where I'm from, in 2014. And we had, it was a weekend, my husband, he came home from work and he said, I've been given 2 opportunities, one to go to France and work and one to go to Abu Dhabi. And I've always been wanting to live abroad. So for me, it was like a no-brainer, I could go either way. And we only had the weekend to decide, which is very not normal for an expat to normally we have more time to decide. So, but we decided on Abu Dhabi because that was so far away from everything we knew. And at the time, my children were 2 and 5. And I had a small startup company in Denmark. And for me, it was easy to just uproot everything and go from there. And after that, we spent 3 years in Abu Dhabi and 2 years in Dubai. And then we had almost 3 years in the south of France. And then 1 year ago, we relocated to Singapore, where we are now. And today, my children are 11 and 14. And yeah, we feel like we have finally, landed here and settled in. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Apart from that, on a personal note, I'm a runner, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm set to have a very high energy level. So I'm always doing something of some sort.
Wow, that's quite a journey, Kia. That's a lot of places, a lot of different experiences. I'm thrilled to hear about the stories. So let's start by telling us what is the main challenge, the biggest challenge. The first time you went abroad, okay? What was the biggest challenge in the adaptation process?
The first time we moved, I was completely and utterly surprised of, my role in this as an expat spouse, because obviously, I had a small company. My partner were, back in Denmark. I was moving to Abu Dhabi. I had 2 little children, but in the Middle East, it's normal you get help. And that is something that is not very normal in Denmark. So I thought that's going to be a walk in the park, no problem. I can easily continue with more or less my everyday life as I know it. So the absolute biggest surprise for me was how time consuming it is to be you could say, the epicenter of everything. For my husband, for my children, for family back home, for establishing new friends, to integrate my children, to make sure they had friends, and at the same time, learning so many new ways of living. In Abu Dhabi, we were living in a small street where the neighbors were South African. On the other side, they were American. Across, we had a Lebanese family, and next to them, we had an Australian family. Next to them, again, we had a local family, and down the road, we had an Italian family. So
very diverse.
The immediate exposure to it was in many ways amazing, but it was also tricky in the sense that when I just went out in the street as me, and as I would normally do, I would have the eyes of God knows how many people. How would you dress? How do you speak to people from South Africa as opposed to people from Australia or Lebanon or wherever, and so that changed me a lot. And it made me, withdraw a little bit and just observe. And that taught me a lot. And it also changed my identity. So the whole process of understanding the great importance it was and still is to be the spouse, and the value that I added to make this adventure we had gone on a success was kind of a surprise for me. And I was clinging very hard on to my own identity. And I did that while my identity also changed. So that was a huge surprise for me. And that was something that I didn't realize until maybe 2, 3, 4 years later, when I could look back at everything. That was a big thing, really big thing, and amazing as well.
That's really interesting, because a lot of when people go abroad, they sort of underestimate the importance that the spouse is going to have in terms of supporting the whole process to happen, as you are saying. So it's so interesting that you are bringing this up, the importance of the spouse as being the integrator of everybody and being the support of everybody. That's really interesting. Yes. And it's also interesting that you mentioned about identity, because I think it's something that happens with a lot of people too. We are shaken by the experiences in a way, in a good way, I would say, which, bit by bit changes us, right? It changes us for the best, I would say.
It definitely changes you for the better, but it also is a huge surprise. And I remember, the first few times we went back to Denmark to visit family and friends, that was when it really became almost black and white how I had changed. Because sitting down at a dinner table, I felt, almost like an observant, as opposed to someone who would just lean in and participate in a conversation. And that was when I knew that I had a different opinion about some of the discussions. In families, you discuss everything, politics, religion, whatever it is. And I could just feel that I was no longer so in that Danish box. I was actually far from it. That was really eye-opening, and that is something we have talked about many times, my husband and I, after we left. How you can feel alienated from, or alienated, but you feel different from your own culture. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So talking about family and dinner tables, etc., tell me a fun story that you have during your adaptation process. It could be from any country. Tell us from, one adaptation fun story that you can share.
Well, I have a lot actually, but when we moved to France, despite the fact of having lived in the Middle East, where time has a complete different value as opposed to like a Danish person, where value is like, that's key, it's very high up there. Where it's more, time doesn't have the same value. It depends on what you're doing in the Middle East. And then we came to France, and I remember thinking, okay, it's back to Europe. I know this. I got this. And I would continuously, for more than a year, show up to any appointments on time, thinking we're back in Europe again. And after 1 year, I realized that, okay, people are not on time. It's just the norm here is to not be on time. So just stop being on time. And for my running training, I would be on time 2-3 times a week for my lessons, French lessons, for everything. And it was consistent that it was just not on time. And that was really, really fun. Something I look back at now and smile. But in this situation, I remember it frustrated me. Like, I am here, you know, I'm showing up on time, I'm well prepared and everything.
And yeah,
then
tell me something. Since you're saying this is a fabulous topic. This is a fabulous topic. Because let's define a little bit about on time, what on time means. So when you were in France and people wouldn't show on time, what was the delay in minutes? So were they 5 minutes delayed, 30 minutes delayed, 1 hour delayed? How much was that? In your perception, in your perception.
Yep. I think, you know, if people were like 10 minutes late, they might send you a message. Oh, I'm late. Or maybe not. Depending a little bit on what it, like French lessons, okay, she would definitely notify me I'm late. Running training, sometimes not. Social gatherings, no note. I mean,
and they would show up after how many minutes? So let's say it's a 1 p.m. It's a 1 p.m. Social gathering. What time would they usually show up?
If it was an informal lunch, like 1:30, they would show up and sit down as if nothing had happened.
But at 2 o'clock or 1:30, what time would they arrive?
I think yes. If like 1:30, they may or may not send a message to say, "Oh, I'm slightly delayed," because and it's actually something that, you know, on one note, it's nice and fine because it allows you as well to get caught up in a moment or to, you know, see something, you know, going there where you want to stop and explore more, because hey, you don't have to think that much about it. But it is so rooted in me from my Danish culture that, you know, I have to be there on time, and it stresses me enormously if I'm not there on time. So, you know, going to neighbors' houses for like date night, drinks and dinner, whatever. And they would invite us, let's say, around 7. And as Danish people, we would show up at 7. And they might not even be home to welcome you.
You know, I'm laughing because that would happen definitely in Brazil, you know. The reason why I'm asking about time, like how many minutes, is because, for example, in Latin America, and especially in Brazil, is very common for you to have a gathering, let's say 1 p.m., and people start to show 1 hour or maybe 2 hours later. They're not going to tell you, I am going to show 1 hour later. Actually, what people there think is that it's super rude to be on time. It's rude because you are going to arrive, and the host wouldn't even have the time to settle things down and organize things, etc. Those who arrive on time are usually those who are very, very close to the host or, you know, to the family. and they do so to help them out, settle and organize everything. So you see, I'm bringing this up just to show to the audience that time can be fluid, as you said. In Middle East is very fluid, and is more rigid and linear in Denmark and in countries with a lower context cultural pattern. So it's so interesting that you're bringing this up. It's as I said, it's so interesting, because French people, when they come to Brazil, they are going to freak out as well. They're going to say, why they delay so much? So it's so interesting that depending on where you are in the culture, the perception can be very different. So yeah, thank you for bringing
absolutely. Very, very much. It's there's a huge difference everywhere, and we know it from as you said, from the Middle East. We have some good friends from they're from Egypt, and they used to host a lot of events and dinners throughout the year, and she would make jokes with me and say, oh, I always tell my husband to get dressed on time when I invite you guys, because I know you're going to be here on time.
That's really funny. Yeah, that's really So talking about differences, that's a good segue. So tell me about the communication differences between these different cultures. So how do you communicate in Denmark versus how you communicate with these different cultures?
Yeah, there's a very, very big difference, actually, from Denmark to all the cultures that we have been living in. Whereas in Denmark, you are, again, conscious of time. So you're very straightforward, you're to the point. We use a lot of sarcasm. You know, you could say, oh, I hurt my hand. And then someone would say, you know, maybe I will give your knee a slap and you won't be hurting that much in your hand, you know, and that would be normal Danish sarcasm, which can be kind of brutal. And we don't waste time, you know, with chit-chatting. It's very straightforward. And then you go to the Middle East, where there's a lot of getting to know each other, and it's very normal, again, with time, that you show up to a meeting and you wait around for an hour, and but then when you start talking, you have to get to know each other. And you know, as a Danish person, I remember, you know, the first many times when you left, you're like, oh, that went really well, you know, they were agreeing with everything, and I think we see eye to eye on this. And then it would be silent after that, and you would go like, what happened? You would follow up until you sort of start to learn that it's a slow process. You have to get to know people, and you have to get to know how to read between the lines. So the learning curve is very steep when you come directly from a Danish point of view. And then when you go to France, I lived in the south of France, I might point out. I think there's a difference definitely to other parts of France. The communication it's hard to get a straight answer. And if you call someone and say, can you give me a quote on a new roof for my house? They might not want to talk to you the first time, maybe not the second time, but then maybe the third time, okay, they will have a serious conversation with you. And again, with my Danish goggles that have now been nuanced by the Middle East, you know, I step back, I'm patient, but I still don't understand what's going on, because I'm here to pay you money, you know, I'm a paying client. Then you have to follow up. So as a client in France, you have to follow up. Signing my son up for football, I remember, required me phoning, God knows how many times, then emailing, and then finally going down to the club, where I was, then given, I don't know how many pieces of paper in French. And then, I had to follow up with, when do you want the money? When can he start? So it's a very different form of communication. And yeah, that is really something you need to get adjusted to. And then again, there is the concept of time, where they're not so stressed, they're not in a hurry. So for them, it's not super urgent to respond, because we can do it next week. And then moving to Singapore, which was again, on a Danish note, a little bit of a relief, because they're very timely and they respond to you. They are not as direct, but they are more time efficient. Here you have to be a little more diplomatic. Again, there's no room for sarcasm. You don't crack a joke. And then there's this whole saving face. So a really good example is going to the doctors, and if you question, the diagnosis or medicine, whatever, just don't do that in front of the secretary or the nurse or anything. And if you have to do that, you do it in a way that does not diminish, his choice or his decisions. And that is, again, it's a new thing to learn. How do I do that? How do I phrase it? What kind of sentences do I use? But I would say generally here in Singapore, they're very much, on time and want to, they try to do the best, and don't we all, like everybody does that. So it's a huge difference, and it is really, really a challenge to get used to. And again, from a social point of view, there's a big difference as well as to how do you manage things from a work point of view. You can be more loose when it's social, especially with the younger generation here in Singapore. But from a work point of view, don't crack a joke. Yeah, no room for that. Definitely, yeah.
This is interesting. This is very interesting, and it's interesting because you had a journey in so many different places that has they have different types of communication, as you said, how they're linear and how they're fluid in terms of time. So it's also awesome in terms of learning how, as you said, how do I express. So you want to express, it's not that you are undermining their, for example, in the doctor's example, it's not that you're saying that they're less or anything like that. It's just a normal question or a normal questioning line, right? But how we phrase things in different places and how we communicate and come across is different. Yeah. So such a fabulous example. Thank you so much for bringing this up. So you said before your something that I just wanted to bring again, which is your role as the spouse. And I wanted to, and how you supported everybody, etc. But now let's talk about before. You mentioned, oh, I didn't have much time to think about it, to prepare, etc. So let's talk about the before. So in your opinion, what's the connection between having a happy expatriation experience and preparing for this experience?
For me, that is make it or break it. If you don't prepare, if nobody, or I would rather say if nobody prepares you for this, because as with everything in life, we don't live backwards. And when we go into something where we have no experience, we have no idea what questions to ask. So you need to prepare in the sense of someone who's a peer, someone who knows this, And I'm not talking about the practical stuff, you know, I'm not talking about the unpacking of moving boxes or the quotes from moving companies or the changing your phone numbers. That's where that's not where you end up in a very bad situation. Where you end up in a very bad situation is when you are not prepared for what's coming your way on an emotional side of things. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the fact that your identity is going to change. A lot of spouses, they leave behind a job and happily thinking this is awesome, this is amazing. And it probably is for the first year or maybe even two. But after that, what's going to happen then? Where's your plan? What's going to happen to you? What does it do to a marriage when you go from having a two-stream income to only one being the breadwinner? How does the breadwinner feel? What kind of pressure is that? Is that a pressure? And for the other part, how do I feel validated for what I do when my validation is normally presented in the form of a paycheck or a bonus or a manager that comes and says, hey, you've done an amazing job? How does that change the dynamic in a marriage? And let me tell you, it changes ginormously. Because your whole foundation as someone who brings money to the table is gone. So what you bring to the table is not calculated in the same way. And on the contrary, you turn out to be the one that keeps doing like this with the credit card, because you pay for everything. You pay for or not you pay for everything, but you're the one, you know, spending the money for the integration. There are a gazillion million lunches you need to do to get to know people. You drink an insane amount of coffees to get to know people. You send your kids to summer camp. You yourself enroll in all sorts of things to get to know people. And you roam around in the city to get acquainted with everything. You do the groceries, you do the school uniforms, you do the blah, 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 the list goes on and on and on. So when you spend and spend and spend and spend, and then on the other hand, you have this, your husband that is in an office, not exploring, not seeing, not everything, but making the money just to see that's going out. That is a conversation you need to have. And you also need to have a conversation about how do you place value on that spouse role? Because if that, like, it's the number one reason why expatriations, they fail, that is because the family is not thriving, and especially as a spouse, because it's a full-time job to be a spouse. You wake up the same time as everybody else, and your day doesn't end until everybody, you know, has everything they need, and you have fulfilled yourself and everything. And at the same time, preparing for your own future is so important. What is going to come for you? It takes about a year plus to get everything settled. But after that, you need to start, you know, looking around, like, what am I going to do to keep myself going? You want to keep yourself relevant, you want to keep yourself happy, because you cannot keep giving and giving and giving, you know, to everybody at home, everybody where you are, to every new friendship. You need to load yourself. And again, also in terms of preparation, what is the loss of income? You have to do the math. What is the loss of pension? Do the math. And how do you secure your pension? How's that done? Because if you go to bed every night and then, oh, there's tension in your marriage, everybody's under pressure, and you start thinking, how am I going to, you know, cope if this ends up in a marriage? And I've seen that 3 times over these 9 years. And they've been women, they could have been male spouses. Women, after God knows how many years, all of a sudden, they're left with nothing. Nothing. Because what? There was nobody preparing them for the fact that make sure that and that and that and that is in place. And it also goes in respect to where are you going? What are your legal rights? You have to prepare for that. Your legal rights, and for instance, in the Middle East, when you move there, me being, I think my ID card said housewife. That alone is in your face. But under Sharia law, at the time we were there, basically my husband, he could have said, you know what, I don't like you anymore, and I'm gonna, tear your ID card apart, and I'm gonna keep the children here. And he could have sent me out of the country, and I could have never ever seen my children anymore. That is really putting it far out. But that could be worst case scenario. So you need to prepare for that. Like what are the laws where you're going? If you have a prenup, if you have testament, if you have this or that, you need to verify that those papers are still valid where you're going. And especially when you're the spouse, because you typically your rights are not the same as someone who has a work permit or employee pass or whatever they call it. So preparation, and this is just, I'm just scratching the surface. There's so much more you need to prepare for, but you really need to prepare for it. And you need to, look your spouse in the eyes and agree that this is a joint thing that you're doing. Yeah. And here in Singapore, for instance, if I applied for a few jobs when we got here, or I applied for many, I got a few, but then, my salary are administered, or it's to be decided. My salary was to be decided by the Ministry of Manpower, and they were not aligned with the companies that wanted to hire me. Hence, even though, I got the job, I couldn't get the job. So you are put in a tricky position as a spouse. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Preparation.
Yeah, I agree. Preparation is key. I think the planning and preparation is the mother of all success. I totally agree.
Yes,
So
definitely.
since you mentioned about the spouse, this is a good segue for my next question, which is, I see very few companies doing exactly that, preparing the spouse. So what happens is that, they make an offer for their employee to have an international assignment, but they totally forget to give any training or preparation or support to the spouse. So Kia, tell me, what would you recommend to companies to help their employees be supported, right? Because when they're, as you mentioned, when the family is okay, when the family is thriving, then the expatriation experience is much happier. So what would you recommend to corporations in terms of putting together a program to prepare the wife?
Yeah.
Or the spouse. Let's not say wife, let's say spouse, because it could be either way, right?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, an expatriation is an investment. And it's regardless of what you invest in, you look at the whole, ecosystem around an investment, and it can even be like a simple thing like my running shoes. I don't just pick any running shoes, off the shelf. I do my research and everything. And for a company, first, the first advice is to look at the statistics, look at the numbers. About 40% of expatriations, they fail. The number one reason is that the spouse and or the family is not thriving, right? So to avoid that, to support that, look at the family. Take an interest in the ecosystem around your investment. What kind of family is this? Are they an active family, or do they like to read books? Do they live in the countryside? Do they live in the city? What can we do to try to land them and put them in the best place possible? So that will be number one. Where do you place people? Because if you're a countryside person and you have no desire whatsoever to live in the city, and you're put in a small apartment in a bustling city, the chances are that the spouse is not going to thrive, let alone only because that she feels stuck in this apartment. Maybe coming from a farm is huge. And then there is simple things like validate them, give them a call. Hello, hi, I am the human resource, or I am the manager of your husband, wife, whatever it may be. I know you're going to be moving soon. Have a conversation, find out who they are. So whatever information you get, you can pass on to local human resource, so that local human resource can make a simple phone call saying, hi, Kia, I know you're here in Singapore now. I know you're a runner. I know you have a daughter that loves horse riding, and I know your son loves playing football. So, I've dug up a running club for you, and, here is maybe a stable for your daughter. Would you like to have lunch one day? I can just give you the lowdown on a little bit of the city, and maybe just get to know you. And then I know from a corporate point of view, like, you might be thinking how you want to separate things. So I think, again, you should also be conscious about where this family coming from. Get to know the family, get to know the spouse, and let them know that you are also there for them. Check in with them from time to time, because as I said before, if you have equal value, but when you have equal value, you also want to, at least, be seen and heard. And it's difficult enough as a spouse to deliver 24/7. But when decisions are to be made that influences your life, you don't get a say, and you don't get a seat at the table. You just get to sit at home and wait. And then, are we going to move? Are we not? What's going to happen now? Are you working more? Are you working less? Are you going to travel more? Are you going to travel less? You have nothing to say. So try to see them. And then a lot of companies, luckily, they offer, a lump sum for education, or, try to help them as well to say, what are your interests? I remember coming to France and wanting to do some courses, and regardless of where I searched, everything was in French. So for me to try to I want to find somewhere where I can do a course in this. It was close to impossible, because I came with not speaking a word of French. So some guidance and some help with keeping yourself afloat, and then like regular contact. And as a last thing, and I know this is very uncommon, but this is something I will fight for in my company, in what I do today as an expat advisor. I think, definitely, not I think, but spouses should be, at least, they should be paid pension, because this is a huge stressor for many spouses. The fact that you have to sort yourself out, and you can do that, but to have some kind of validation for all the work you're doing. Because if you're not thriving and you're not doing what you're doing, then that employee that you invested all this money in, he or she cannot go and do what you want them to do. And that is just, period. That's a very short explanation, and to make a point that I am the most important support function for Michael, my husband, for him to go and do what he does. If I am not there, he cannot do that. And that's just how it is, full stop. Yeah.
And it can become distractful to the employee, right? And he will not perform. It could be distracting for the employee when the support is not there, as you said. It can be distracting to the employee, and they cannot perform as well.
Yeah, and if I'm not there, he cannot travel. There are 2 children here as well. And if I am unhappy, and that's another big thing, if I'm unhappy, I have nowhere to go. The only person I talk to is my husband, who will come home after God knows how many hours of work, and then he has to listen to all my frustrations, and that creates friction in a marriage, and it sort of wears out, the surplus on both sides, and I can vouch for the fact that it creates some very nasty arguments that we have, luckily surpassed and worked our way through. And it's only when you go to the other side of everything, you're out on the other side, you can look back and say, whoa, normally this I would have talked to my boss or my best friend or my mom or whatever, about some of it. But because we're here, there's a 7-hour time difference from here to Denmark. And because I don't have a boss or, a confidential third part, that I can talk to about these things, I take everything on him. And that is a huge burden for a marriage. Definitely it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a lot of learning. So that's a good segue to my last question before we talk about hand gesture and the deck, which is, what did your expatriation experience teach you? If you could say before you explain, if you could say in one word, what would that word be?
One word would be acceptance. Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
Yeah. I am accepting myself much more, and I am accepting and have tolerance, and I'm super curious about other cultures, other people, other religions, other ways of celebrating and doing, value sets. I accept it, and I am more curious than I am judgmental. And I'm not proud to say, but definitely when I lived in Denmark, I was very like, this is the way you do it, and that's weird, and oh, that's different. I don't like that. That was me. I am no longer that at all. I don't look at people's appearance or I look at people's appearance, but I don't judge it. I don't judge different hair or Indian clothing or Muslims or Jewish people. I don't. I'm more interested in who is sitting next to me, and that has been a huge gift in my life. Really, I have met so many fantastic people just from sitting down and getting rid of that filter that I was going to say Denmark put on me, but I mean, you also have a choice yourself, of course. But that is definitely the biggest thing, acceptance. Yeah. And then I think also what I have learned over the last 9 years is something you can never ever start to learn. It's a free education. I think actually it's fair to say that I have a university degree in something that doesn't have a name, like an education that doesn't have a name. Because you can, like, it's going traveling, you can buy the little books or read online about, oh, this is the country, this what you should do this and not that and blah blah blah. But once you set foot there, you will discover that, oh, it wasn't quite like in the book, or there are nuances here, or so yeah, a huge gift.
Super.
Definitely.
Wow,
yeah.
that's so inspiring. It's really inspiring because it indeed changes us a lot. And it helps us indeed become a lot more open-minded, less judgmental. Wow, that's such a good lesson. I love it.
Yeah.
So my last question before we do some card reading is about hand gestures. So for example, in Brazil, if we want to say that something is delicious or something is really good, we would do this gesture, for example. We could do, this is superb. Do you have any hand gestures in Denmark, or do you want to say something about gestures in general in Denmark?
Ooh, we don't have any, not any like particular hand gestures. I mean, we have an extreme amount of people biking in Denmark. So I think you have a lot of, maybe get out of my way or something like that, but more on a sweet note. Hand gestures, not really, but in Denmark, if you go to Denmark, if you relocate to Denmark, time, as I've mentioned before, is a thing in Denmark. You should be time conscious. You should be on time. And if you have a meeting at 10 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock.
And it's not rude to be at 10 o'clock, right?
No, definitely not at all. Not the slightest, not the slightest. And then Danish people are also super busy people. So we're not the kind of people that would hang around in the office and then, yeah, let's go and have a bite to eat in the evening. Everybody have to leave the office and, either pick up children or they have sports or they have other stuff going on. So if you want to socialize with the Danish people, you have to put it in the calendar and you have to be willing to, plan ahead. And yeah, as I said, be on time. That's a big thing.
Awesome.
Unless it's changed over the last 9 years, but as far as I know, it hasn't.
Yeah, it changed. But if you the tip is, if you're going to Denmark, be conscious about that. Be conscious that people are straightforward. They prefer if you were there on time, and they are not so much prone to chit-chatting. They would, if they have to chit-chat or socialize, it's better to plan ahead, put things on schedule. I think that's a great lesson. That's a great lesson for those people planning to go to Denmark, especially if they come from a place, for example, like Latin America or even the Middle East, which is so different from Denmark, right? So that's a good tip.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do something that I really love, because it usually brings so many good, examples and so many good things. That what it is I'm going to show you a card from our deck. This is a deck to help us, with resilience, with, thinking and gaining awareness about ourselves. So I'm going to pull a card here for you, a selected card, and you're going to read it out loud. It's very few sentences. You're going to read it out loud, and then you're going to say anything that crosses your mind. How about that?
All right. Yes, let's go. So I'm going to read it out loud. I decide what's fertile in my life. I am in control of my life. Through creativity and nurture, I always bring innovation and opportunity. And at the very bottom, it says fertility. So the first thing that pops in my head when I read that is something I recently made a note about, because part of what I am doing now and what I'm going to continue doing is public speaking about this expat life. And one of the subjects that I wrote down as a topic is that once I started treating myself properly, things started to change. And that falls back on two things. The first thing is, as an expat spouse, working expat spouse, Once I started saying, everybody, you have to go away now, because I am also a person. I need to take my own space. That's when things started to change. So that was sort of like nurturing myself. And from that came creativity and the beginning of writing my book and building my company. So that was number one. And the other one, I currently forgot because I was so absorbed in the first one. Yes, the other one is, it comes from when you want to succeed with something, if you want to get your message across, which is a lot of what I'm working on now, you know, the communication of how am I going to penetrate companies? How am I going to phrase this? And the minute, again, I started validating my own opinions, because I have been very, I wouldn't say scared, but I have been very considerate about, you know, airing my voice about this, you know, because what are the reactions going to be? You know, what is my husband going to think? You know, what is his company going to say? Not that they would, I think, ever notice. But once I started nurturing my own opinion and saying, my opinion is very valid, and feeling confident about that, from there on, you know, the creativity on how to mold this message and get it across started. And that's about a year ago now. And I can see myself how it has flourished into, you know, when I look at some of the first designs I did, whether it was like posts for Instagram or text for my website or LinkedIn, I can see how it has changed. And that definitely has sparked creativity. And yeah, so definitely, and if I have to lean into the word like fertility, I am way beyond fertile when it comes to this business. I am completely confident in what I'm doing. So yeah, that was a good car.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
that's
Thank
a
you
good
for that.
reading. You know, it's interesting because every time I show one card to a person and ask them their, you know, what crosses their mind and what brings for them with that saying, everybody says something different, but it's always powerful. You know, it always helps them see and for example, in your case, how by, you know, creating some boundaries for yourself by and centering and paying attention to you and your voice, you saw
Yes.
how much creativity you have and how much stuff you have to say and have to do, and this brought about everything in your life, right? It's like flourishing. So it's so interesting to see how the card has an effect, you know, different effects on people. So thank you so much for sharing this, Kia. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being in our show. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I loved it, and I love everything you do, you know, and I really enjoyed this conversation a lot. And thank you for your time here. That has really been amazing. And I love the card thing, you know, as a little hidden surprise.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being in our show. Whoa, that was fun. I really enjoyed these conversations, and I hope you do too. If you like this conversation, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to our channel. Listen, we do a lot of interviews, but we also do other videos with key leadership concepts to help you lead internationally. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned. Hey, I want to tell you one more thing. You are a global leader. The question is, do you have all the skills that you need to succeed? I'd love to help. I save my very best tips for my subscribers. Subscribe for free at coachingexpatriates.com. I know your inbox is sacred, so I promise I will send you emails that you will love.